Welcome to the Marta podcast, a sacred space of reclamation, unraveling, and in the age where loneliness and isolation are at an all-time high, also a place of deep connection to each other as well as to ourselves. As I share the intimate journey of my own life, I hope to reflect your own so that you can live more deeply and freely from a place of full alignment and authenticity. Because that is what we're here to do, to continually discover ourselves in order to fully express our sacredness, wholeness, and radiance as women. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get started. Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Marta podcast. Thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you for listening and spending time with me. Today, I decided I wanted to expand a little bit on what I touched on in the last episode, and that is the topic of the longing, and that longing that comes for us as women from within when we have that sense of going through life like we're going through the motions, like something is missing, like something isn't quite right. We don't feel ourselves. We feel numb and disconnected. And on the last episode, I talked about this and reconnecting to our softness, reconnecting to that tender, gentle part of what it means to be feminine. And I feel that there's a second part to that I wanted to bring in today, because the feminine isn't only soft, tender, and warm and flowy and open. That is a big part of what she is. And my journey into reconnecting, my own descent into the parts of myself that I had forgotten, repressed, and lost along the way, started truly with reconnecting to that softness and tenderness. And I do still believe that that is so needed in the world today, which seems tough and hard and hurried, edgy, So I'm all for this tenderness and the softness. But I wanted to deepen and complete the conversation by talking about the divine feminine and other aspect of her, which is her fire. And very often when we're disconnected from our feminine and we're living life from more of the masculine, the functional, the doing, and the achieving and multitasking and being the ones in charge of life and sort of like taking life by the horns, as I said, and getting things done, we disconnect from the feminine. And we don't just disconnect from our tender, loving hearts. We also very often disconnect from our passions and that deep, burning desire. And both of these things are a result of disconnecting from our instinct, disconnecting from the wisdom that sits in our bodies as women. And I mentioned on the last episode how much living these days is done from the brain, from the head, from the thoughts, from the words. How much of living to me feels like performance of life versus sensing and feeling it, being fully embodied and present to whatever is in it at the moment. And that the return of experiencing life from this level begins in the return to the body, and so therefore in the descent into the shadows, into parts of ourselves that we've repressed. But in our survival mode, it's not only that the softness and their tenderness is very often suppressed, it's also our fire. If you think about your anger, I spend so much of my life saying, I'm just not an angry person. And that's because, A, there was so much on top of that anger that was burying it and squashing it down. And 2, because anger was just something that was not permissible for me to experience as a girl and as a woman. If you think about self-expressing some of your fiery emotions, we're very often told we're too much, we're too loud, we're hormonal, we're irrational, we're emotional, we're just crazy. And those are all expressions whose aim is really to keep us in our place, to keep us submissive, to keep us palatable, to keep us digestible, to keep us small. Because a self-expressed woman is the ultimate act of defiance. It's the ultimate act of rebellion. And she, in her fullness, is actually quite dangerous. And so when you're told as a little girl that anger is not allowed because you should be a nice girl, in order to be loved and accepted by those around you, you simply start repressing it. But through the descent, through reconnecting to parts of myself that I repressed, through reconnecting to my heart and the softness and their tenderness, the more I slowed down, the more I opened, the softer and more loving I became towards myself. More and more what started happening was I started opening, and from the depths of me, there came this insane level of anger. At first, I started experiencing it as resentment. It was almost like resentment isn't a loud form of anger. But as I started peeling back the layers of it and not projecting my anger towards someone or something that made me angry, when I took radical responsibility for myself and I realized they're not making me angry, I'm carrying this anger within me, and there are external circumstances and triggers that keep poking at it, awakening it in me, and yet I keep stuffing it down. And it got to the point where it started to feel so enormous, I could literally feel it rising in my body as this fire. And when I started exploring it somatically, like anger normally sits in your belly. Like if you think of your womb space as this, like I sometimes think of it like as a fire that we're stoking, like in the belly, in the womb, there is that fire of your own fierceness and aliveness. And we're told to keep the fire small and tamed and manageable. But when you start taking off everything that you've put in place in order to shape it and tame it and lower the flames, and you allow that anger to just build up to the level that it's actually at naturally in your body, when I did that, what I started tapping into was pure rage. And as a woman who was raised in a Christian country in Eastern Europe, which was very much focused on manners, well-mannered behavior in public. I came from a family where my mom was in the public eye, so everyone was always watching and there was a right way to behave. So much focus on what things looked like from the outside. Our home, our family, but also me as a little girl, there were expectations I had to meet. It was literally like, as I'm talking about it, it feels like a cage. There was never any space to explore, well, what's naturally in me? What's rising up and coming to the surface? And so many things were, brushed off and laughed off that literally would stoke that fire of anger and rage in me. And I never had the space to explore it. And I think a safe and guided exploration into my anger and my rage as a young woman, as a little girl, would have given me some sort of a context, some sort of a relationship with my anger. But because I had hidden it, repressed, deleted, rejected it for so long, denied it myself, like I literally said, I'm not an angry person, I so disconnected from anger, which is just a normal and natural emotion for a human being. there was a complete lack of connection with it. And so in the moments that it would start to come up naturally on its own, it would freak me out. And I just would be like, I would start to feel the things that I so long heard, that I'm just crazy. I'm irrational. I think I'm going, how often do you say, I think I'm going crazy? And it's that feeling of not allowing yourself to experience something internally. I'm not going to allow this to come up, because if I can't, how am I going to navigate it? How am I going to numb it so I don't look crazy to the outside world? But obviously, like, that is not the answer, right? And the longer you repress and push something down, the more likely you are to completely explode and come unglued when someone just happens to press the right button at the right moment. Next thing you know, you're biting someone's head off because, they misspelled your name on a latte or whatever. And so as I started to move through the reconnection to my softness and my feminine side, it was almost like the archetype of the divine feminine was like, hey, do not limit me to just the softness and the tenderness. Do not attempt to manipulate me into some digestible form. So what I started exploring was my anger as a sacred rage. And I would go on these walks around this pond close to where I live. And I made this sacred rage playlist, and I would pop in my headphones and walk the pond in circles and literally invite the feeling to come up from the abyss, allowing it to flood my body. And I was walking that pond and I was pissed. I hope you didn't see me when I was walking it, because you would have been like, that woman, she's not in a good place. But I started experimenting with allowing myself to experience my own rage. And it was rage that was mine. It was rage that was my mother's. It was rage that was that of every woman in my family and my lineage. It was rage of us all as women. And my God, we have a lot to be angry about. And it was the collective rage, just of the female, the feminine, and the many injustices, the many ways we've been repressed, oppressed, deleted, erased, the story of us rewritten in the books. And so I just would walk with my rage and allow myself to feel it. And it would come up in the belly. And then literally I would feel it in my throat. And there would be moments where I just would want to scream. But I didn't go that far. I was like, I'm not going to walk this pond angry and screaming. I might get put away for that. I saved that from my private moments. And so I would have days where I would get in my car to drive somewhere, and I would just indulge myself in allowing a scream in my car that came from the depths of my belly. And the first time I did it, it scared me, because there was so much thickness, depth, and power to it. But there was also such power in allowing it not just to come up from the abyss, but to move through me. And so slowly I started releasing some of the anger that was old and not even mine, so that I can actually begin to have a healthy relationship with my daily anger. As a woman, I am allowed to be angry. As a woman, you are allowed to be angry. But when we can self-express that anger in a mature way, we can use that anger to actually fuel our own fire. The desire for living, the desire to do something, a passion, a want, a creative fire, all of that comes from being in touch with that powerful force that we so often disconnect from, because we need to be domesticated in order to belong, to fit in, and meet expectations. And so what I started exploring is my own wildness. Like I said, I came from a place where it was not only Catholic, but also Eastern European with a huge focus on manners. So much of my childhood was about being molded, formed, and shaped. And so there was no space for the expression of my rawness as a woman. And then, if you're a mother, you know what I'm talking about. That mama bear instinct. When someone messes with your babies, oh, they have another thing coming. But we should have a healthy and regular relationship with that rage, with that anger. And we should, as women who are emotionally intelligent, use that, focus it, manipulate it, not in a way of distorting it, but in a way of mastery of it, using it as the life force that it is, because it flows through us for a reason. And so what I wanted to ask you today is, what is your relationship with your anger? Is it something that you're just so disconnected from that you're like, I'm just not an angry person? And if that's the case, I invite you to look at what happened in your home with anger when you were a little girl. What stories around anger did you inherit from those who raised you? I had a lot of stories I inherited. And I hear from a lot of women the narrative of an explosive, angry father. And then the adaptation is, I'll never be like that. And so we cut off access to our own anger, not to become like the monster we had to tiptoe around when we were little. Or are you maybe so in touch with your rage and your anger, it's so alive in you that literally it's poked at almost every human interaction? Can you allow yourself to be with your anger, to feel it, to express it, to befriend it, so that you can alchemize it into creative force that it is, into the passion, the desire that it's meant to evoke? I just love looking at this because it is very rare, and I'm just learning this now at 51, that you find a woman who's very comfortable with expressing her anger, but in a healthy way. Plenty of women will scream and yell. Plenty of women will completely suppress it. But to express your anger in a mature and powerful way while you're grounded and regulated, let me tell you, is a work of art. I've had experiences of it, and it is the most powerful feeling. When I can say to my husband, it happened the other day, that I am angry. And not angry because the anger that was already in me was triggered by something, meaning an old anger from the past all of a sudden is coming up to the surface, but a regular everyday thing that happens. And I'm like, hey, when you did that, it made me really angry. And that is just not okay. There's a boundary that was crossed there, and it made me really angry. And expressing that in a healthy way, not biting his head off, not silencing it whatsoever, is one of the most profound experiences for me, because it was so new at 51. And the more I started to allow anger, the more I started to befriend it and integrate it and love it into my wholeness, bring it into my existence, the more of a sudden became accessible to me in terms of, what do I want and what do I desire as a woman? What is it that I'm being invited to create next? What kind of an experience is inviting me to dance with it? And it was just a wider range of experience as a human being when nothing about who you are and what you feel is being repressed or controlled. And this wild feminine, there is such an aspect of her that wants to burn shit down and destroy. And that too is part of creation. The wild feminine is not palatable, and her anger and her fire very often will burn something down to end a season and begin something anew. It's not always soft and tender and changing seasons in life as if flipping a page of the most beautiful novel you've read. It's not always flowy and, movable, graceful. Sometimes there is a fire to an end of a season. Sometimes you exit something and you blow up the building as you leave. And that too is being a woman. And that too is the sacred feminine. And so I just wanted to come back and touch on that, because I think the conversation about the feminine is incomplete without talking about the wild woman, the wild feminine, and only talking about the feminine as the long skirts and flowers and flow and openness and soft hearts and tenderness. And again, that is also true. But if you tap into the archetype of the mother, the one that holds, nurtures, breastfeeds her offspring, you also know the mama bear that is there, just waiting for you to mess with her, and so she can claw your eyes out. That too is the divine feminine. And can we not strip her of that? Because then we're doing her and ourselves a huge disservice. So I invite you to explore your own sacred rage. It has a story to tell you. The story of generations of women that came before you. The story of the women in your own family, in your own lineage. And also the story of what you were allowed and not allowed to experience and express as a little girl, as a young woman, and as a grown adult when it comes to rage and anger. And can you invite your rage and anger to dance, to come up to the surface, and to show you the wisdom that anger and rage bring when we're willing to look at it, to love that about ourselves, to accept it, and to integrate it into our whole being. I'll leave that with you. Thanks for tuning in. I look forward to talking with you next time. Take care. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you resonate with this message, or if you have a topic you'd like me to discuss in a future episode, I would love to hear about it. Send me a message on Instagram @MartaHobbs. If you'd like to move more deeply in a community of like-minded, soul-led women, please join me in mine. It's called Come Closer. And if someone in your life would benefit from today's episode, I would love it if you send it along to them. Just click share in your podcast app and text it to a friend. Finally, I would be so grateful if you'd rate and review the Marta Hobbs podcast in your favorite podcast app. Your support will help this show find the women who need it. Thanks so much for sharing your time with me today. Until next time, I'm sending you all my love. Take care.